On today's episode, we're installing the hybrid diff in the Samurai and doing an SJ410 backing plate modification. Stay tuned.
Sponsored by TRE 4x4BC.
All right, so the moment of truth, the time and the video you guys have all been waiting for. We're finally putting the hybrid diff into the Samurai. And one of the first things we got to do, basically, is remove the tires, remove the axles, pull the whole axle housing out, and get prepared to put the new one in. So let's get after it. So the advantage to doing the SJ10 backing plate mod is so that you don't have to go through all this work just to remove the axle. I mean, I'd be able to pull the axle already if I had the modification done. I'm going to continue to take these last 4 flange bolts off, and then we'll slide hammer out the old axle. Okay, so we got the 4 nuts in the back holding this assembly on. We've got them off, and you might have seen this here slide hammer looking contraption when I was pulling the brake cylinder, or when I was pulling the brake drums off. I just built this thing back when I was building the Suzuki. And it's a handy little apparatus to have if you're on the trail or whatever. You're going to need something like this if you break an axle to pull these axle stubs out. You can go and rent a slide hammer from probably your local parts store or something like that. But I just built this thing and it seems to work okay. Two hits and she come right out. Woo, them old wheel bearings are shot. Have a look at this. Look at how bad they rock. Them wheel bearings were just about had her, and I knew they were bad. All right, so now all that's left is to just transfer these e-brake mounts from this diff to that diff, and we're ready to fire it back in. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut these mounts off, weld them on there, go to town, get some new U-bolts, and stick her back together, get some new brakes, get some new drums, a few other things that were wore right out, put some new seals and bearings in there, and we'll be back in business with a tougher, stronger, lower geared rear diff with an air locker. All right guys, I'm back from town. Got my U-bolts, got some gear oil, got a bunch of other stuff. Also, the new shirts come in. So there will be shirts now available. I got a local place making shirts, hoodies, and whatnot, other stuff for us. So if you guys are interested in a shirt, just go ahead and send me an email and we'll get a shirt out for you guys. All right, so we can get to doing these SJ410 backing plate mod, and to do that we got to cut these old nasty bearings off because they're shot anyhow. So we'll just cut them off with a plasma cutter or a zip cut or whatever. We'll get that stuff out of the way, pull the axles out, and then we'll be ready to modify these backing plates. It's a pretty simple mod, but it'd save you a ton of time on the trail if you ever had to change an axle or wheel bearings even. If you ever change wheel bearings, you know, when you run big tires on a Samurai, it kills wheel bearings fairly regular, once a year or so. Once every couple of years, you'll be changing wheel bearings. So this will help you just even in that fact, changing wheel bearings. So let's have at her. All right, so here you can see, I just take your little die grinder, side grinder or whatever, cut a slot in it, hit it with a chisel, it expands, and then it slides off of here because it's pressed onto this sleeve here. Same thing with your bearing. Cut a slot in it, hit it with a chisel, it splits. It actually broke. This bearing was actually cracked. And then all this stuff comes off. That's part of the old seal there. So this is a bearing retainer, and this is what's left of the bearing race. And then this is just like a tapered washer that sits on here. Just like that. And then that lets you pull the backing plate off. So I mean, that would be a major pain to do on the trail. It'd be next to impossible unless you have grinders and stuff with you. So let's go do this one here. So the trick when you're cutting these races is you don't want to cut all the way through and cut into the axle. You want to cut just about all the way through, take a chisel, hit it here with a hammer, and it splits it and spreads it open. Same with the bearing race. Okay, now we can clean these up, and then what we end up doing is cutting a hole out here, 3 inches, so that the bearing can actually pass through. To do this mod, what you need, obviously, is some wheel bearings and the retainers and some SJ410 backing plates. And what you'll see here is you can obviously not remove the axle with the wheel bearing when the hole on this backing plate is too small to allow the bearing to pass through when you try and pull the axle out. So you're going to end up cutting this hole out bigger so that your bearing can pass through, and then the backing plate, you want to notch it so that you can just slip it over the axle. So I will show you how this works. We're just going to put a couple of nuts on them, smack them with a hammer. The studs should come out, and then we'll pull them back through later. We'll keep these studs over here and do the same thing to the other one. Okay, so you see the bearing has to come out here. So I just took a yellow paint marker and marked it so I know I don't cut no wider than the yellow paint marker. And I'm just going to take the plasma cutter and cut that out. What I got to do is I got to bend some brake lines. So I've got this stationary piece, and then I put these backing plates on, and I've got the spot where the brake line goes in. So I'll custom bend some new brake lines, and then she's ready to go under the Zook. So I'm just gonna basically bend this tubing into the shape I need to get around all this stuff, and screw it in, make sure it screws in here, and then the stock Samurai brake lines will come into here, and it'll be just a 1, 2, 3, and she'll be in. So let's bend up some brake lines. Now this black line, the guy at the auto parts store actually said that this dark black line you can bend by hand, and he's right, you can bend it just by hand. Don't need a tubing bender or nothing. It bends nice and easy. And we'll just tighten these in. And we'll tighten this in, we'll leave this rubber line attached over here, just so we don't get no dirt and whatnot into the brake line. All right, I think that fits pretty good. Let's just tighten it the rest of the way. Nice and tight, should be no snags. Looks good. All right, we got the old brake lines all fitted up. I believe she's ready to slide under the Zook and put some U-bolts on her and bolt her up. All right, now we'll just finish hooking up the e-brake line, and that'll be enough for tonight. All right, so she's time to stab the bearings and the retainers on. I already did the short shaft, and you can see it's all frosty. I had the drive shaft in the freezer overnight, so it's good and frosty, and it shrinks the shaft down just a little bit, so it helps make the bearings and these retainers slide on just a smidge easier. Not a whole lot, but it does help. So I'm just gonna go grab the other one out of the freezer, bring it in here, and I'm going to slam the bearings on. And I just use a piece of DOM, the right size, that it just goes over the shaft, but it hits right on the inner race of the bearings, and I just slide hammer them on, and it actually works pretty good. They go on stiff, but a little bit of grease on the inside of the race and a cold shaft definitely helps. Got a nice cold axle shaft. Make sure you put the bearing down the right way. Slides down and we'll slide hammer this baby on. We'll make sure it's seated all the way, looks good. And we'll put the retainer on. Looks good. Nice new bearings. So here's the beauty of the whole system. You should be able to just take this guy, slide him in there. Careful not to mangle your seal. Get him engaged with the splines and just shove him in. And there's your axle. And I just left a couple of these bolts holding this backing plate on, which those can be just pulled out. And then you just drop this guy on like that and run your bolts back through it. Pretty simple mod. It's going to make it super easy to pull these axles out again later on down the road when it needs wheel bearings, or if a guy happens to break an axle. It's going to make a way easier trail fix.
Out in stormy weather, I might have the blues, but nothing ever stopped me from dusting off my shoes. You might think you'll see me.
So there we go. We got the old hybrid diff in, and it was a bit of a chore. I kind of didn't video installing the diff and getting the U-bolts up. It was a little bit of a chore, you know, just to manhandle that by yourself. But overall, it turned out good. I moved the diff back an inch because the snout of that tracker third is a little bit longer than the Samurai third, so it's going to make you need a shorter drive shaft. So I just moved the whole axle back to the next hole back, and should work out good. So the next episode, you're going to see me bleeding the brakes maybe, and taking her for a drive and trying out the old TRE air locker. Should be pretty awesome. So if you guys are enjoying this sort of content, go ahead, subscribe, share, like these videos, hit the bell to be notified, give me a thumbs up. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's @Fabbin_adventures. We'll catch you guys next Friday.